Thanks everybody who's already joined and taken that poll. It looks like we've got a couple of responses coming in. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. I know we've got a lot of good content to cover and we're excited you're here. Oops, accidentally jumping ahead. It looked like Bernie raised his hand. Would you mind putting your question in the chat and Allie or Joey can get to it? Or maybe you're taking a drink of coffee and Zoom thought you were raising your hand.
You hit the wrong button.
That's good. I'm glad everything's working for you. That's always my fear is technology is always out of our control. So we're just hitting noon Eastern time. So we'll go ahead and get started because I know we've got a lot to cover. We want to make sure that we've got plenty of time for Q&A today. Thank you for joining our webinar. We are recording. We will be sending out the recording tomorrow for everybody who's joining and those who might not be able to stay for the whole time. Know that that will be coming to you. Please feel free to drop questions in the Q&A as we go. We'll be answering questions as we go, but we've also left some time at the end for additional Q&A. So we want to make sure that we've got enough time for that. The chat is also open, so Allie and Joey will be keeping an eye on the chat and the Q&A for us while I'm sharing slides. So we have a little poll going on. If you've just joined and you haven't had a chance to answer, please feel free to drop in your answers. This will help guide us in the content to cover today. So we are trying to make it responsive to what you're letting us know. So we'll go ahead and get started. So for AEO and beyond, optimized AI-powered search and discovery, thanks for being here. We're happy you're here. To give you a little introduction about your host, B2 Communications, that's us. We are one team dedicated to your success. We really work as an extension of your in-house team. But I also want to mention that we work with other agencies and independent practitioners. I know we have a lot of them on the call today. So I want to make sure that you know that we take a collaborative approach to our flexible model and that we're committed to results. Our area of specialization is complex communications. So that's why we're so excited about AEO and GEO because it feels complex, but we're going to break it down and make it sound easy for you. But as an agency, we're really committed to smart strategies and meaningful results. We take a strategic approach that's tailored tactics that matter to your business. So we don't just take a stock plan and take it off the shelf and apply to your business. We really dive into your complex business, what's mattering to you, and how we can have results on that. We are based in the East Coast. Allie, Joey, and I are all in different places. We're a fully distributed team, but you would never know it because we are seamless in how we work, that we're working nationally across time zones. So thanks for being here. A little bit about the services. AEO and GEO is just one of them. We also work in communication strategy, content strategy and creation. That might be websites or social media optimization. AI optimization is our newest service offering. We added it in the past couple of months in response to questions from our clients and from people we were talking to, really wanting to figure out how to get cited by the LLMs that are feeding into ChatGPT, Perplexity, and all of the other services that we're going to be talking a lot about today. We also do media relations. A lot of our work is in trade media, but we're also working in markets across the country, not just on the East Coast. We're doing quite a bit in California, Illinois, Texas, and across the country. We also do quite a bit of training like this. We can customize it for your team. We also do media training for executives in small groups and one-on-one, along with presentation training. But um, our final core service is high stakes communication, which some people also call crisis communication. We changed it to high stakes because there's so many different times that your organization might be going through change that you might not think of it as crisis communication, but you can't quite afford to get it wrong. So we have renamed that as high stakes communications. But above all, we really work to identify and capitalize on opportunities that fuel your success. So we're committed in finding what works for you. And I'd be remiss if we didn't introduce ourselves. I'm Missy Hurley. I'm the co-founder and CEO of B2 Communications and the chief strategist. So I'm lucky enough to work with Allie and Joey, who are on the call with me today. Joey is our account manager who develops and implements strategic PR plans for clients who are looking to build awareness and credibility. And Allie is our account executive, and she is implementing a lot of the plans and strategies that we're coming up with each individual business. So you're going to be hearing from all three of us today. It won't just be me talking. It's a lot more fun when Allie and Joey join in the conversation. I learn something new from them every day. So I want to share out some of those poll results. If you have not voted just yet, go ahead and vote. I'll take a minute before we end our poll, but it looks like a good number of you have participated already. So to read off some of those results, it looks like about a third of you are already know that your company is showing up on AI searches, but there's quite a few of you who aren't sure about it just yet. So that's great because we'll be diving into some ways that you can find out how your company is showing up on search. And it looks like for the most part, people are showing up on ChatGPT and Google AI overviews. About a third on ChatGPT, and then it looks like about a quarter on Google AI overviews, with Perplexity, Claude, Copilot, and Gemini kind of equal in where they're showing up. And for the folks who have started working on how their company shows up, it looks like most of you are still learning, which is what we're here to do together today. So I'm excited for that. So let me see if I can share these results. It's my first time using a poll, so I'm not exactly what's going to happen when I hit the share button, but I'm going to do it anyhow. Are you guys able to see those results? Okay, I see some head nods. Excellent. All right. So Joey, I think you're the one that is going to kick us off into our topic.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you, Missy. And hi, everyone. Yeah, so let's just get into it. Why does AI optimization matter? What we're seeing is a real shift in how people search. AI isn't replacing search, but it is changing where search starts. And that has a big impact on how people discover brands and even which options they consider. One stat that really stood out to us was about 1 in 3 people are now starting with AI tools instead of Google. So instead of clicking through a bunch of links, they're asking AI chatbots like ChatGPT, Perplexity, and Gemini to name a few. They're looking for them to get a direct answer. And the reality is, 60% of people say those answers are actually better and clearer than what they get from traditional search. So naturally, more people are starting there first. And this is what creates what we call a hybrid search journey. This is where AI gives you that first answer, and then people go to a search engine like Google to validate that answer. So the user might ask ChatGPT for recommendations, then search those companies to make sure they're credible. And this is where it gets, very important. If you show up in one place, but, not the other, it kind of creates a disconnect. And that's where you can, kind of lose credibility. So as more people move in this direction, three things really matter: visibility, trust, and clarity. Because if AI can't clearly understand your brand or summarize it, you're probably not going to get included in, really any of these searches that are going on. So moving on to the next slide, so why does, what we're talking about, why does this all matter? The big shift here is that people are starting to use tools like ChatGPT the same way they would use Google. They're asking for recommendations, like, they're researching different vendors, they're comparing different options, all within an AI chatbot or LLM. And, that means your first impression is increasingly happening inside an AI generated summary, not on your website, that everyone puts I know a ton of time in creating content for. So if your content isn't easy to understand or summarize, or it's not differentiated enough, there's a good chance you don't even get considered. But on the flip side, if you do show up, it builds instant awareness and credibility because you're being presented as part of the answer. So with that as the kind of foundation, I'm going to pass it over to Allie to walk through some AI powered, kind of what AI powered search actually is and how it works.
Yep. So to understand AI-powered search, I'll start by sharing some language that's often referenced with the topic. So first off, LLM, that stands for a large language model, which, believe it or not, you've probably heard of and maybe even used. LLMs are what is actually powering the results that is appearing in response to your prompt or query. So ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, Copilot, and Gemini, those are all LLMs. The next term that we want to touch on is SEO, which stands for Search Engine Optimization. And you might have heard this term before if you've been in the marketing communications realm for quite a bit. This has been used for quite a few years to ensure web pages are showing up in search engine results by utilizing keyword optimization strategies. Next, I'll touch on AEO, which is the one of two new terms that have been introduced with AI search. So AEO is answer engine optimization, and this is all about making your content directly usable as answers by AI-driven tools. Think voice assistants or chatbots. You've probably used Siri or Amazon Alexa, so that's exactly what we're talking about here. So a few things that can affect your AEO are your page structure, FAQs, whether you have them or not, and your data on a web page, whether it's organized or not. So all of these factors can satisfy the AEO component, which Joey will talk a little bit more about in a couple slides. And lastly, we have GEO, which stands for Generative Engine Optimization. And this is the step that's actually getting your content cited in results from ChatGPT or Google's AI overview. This requirement wants you to utilize original, unique content that is supported by evidence. So whether it's data, case studies, etc. This image does a really great job of showing how SEO, AEO, and GEO form a ladder for content visibility. We try to remind ourselves that SEO gets you noticed, AEO gets you quoted, and GEO gets you referenced by AI. So now I'll let Missy share a little bit more about what AI platforms are reading and citing.
Yeah, and just a quick shout out to Business Wire for some of those definitions. I think they were the most easy to understand definitions that we were able to find. So wanted to give some credit where credit was due that, we've been reading a lot from the Muckrack State of AI report, but also the reports that are being put out by other industry partners like Business Wire. So as we think about kind of what are they reading, what they're reading is a little bit different. So thank you, Allie, for those definitions. They do build on one another. So some of the things that you hear us talk about in terms of like structure is going to feel very similar to SEO, but it's layering on, like Allie mentioned, to make sure that we're thinking about what are they reading. So I put a fun picture on here for the folks who've been in the business for a while. Those are going to look familiar. They're your encyclopedia We no longer have those on our shelves because we have the internet, because that's what they're reading. They're not reading the dusty encyclopedias. They're really looking to earned media, your website. They're looking at consumer generated content like Reddit and Facebook. And they are looking at wire releases, which it looks like the jury's still out on how they're looking at wire releases. We know that they're reading them on the platforms like PR Newswire and Business Wire, but the syndication portion is the part that doesn't quite matter quite as much. But the LLMs are looking into those distribution platforms like PR Newswire and Business Wire as a credible source for news. We're finding that our newsrooms, so company newsrooms, account for about 18% of ChatGPT citations, but that's different based on which platform you're looking at. So if Google's AI platforms are the ones that you're looking at, like Gemini or the snippets or citations, it's only about 3%. So choosing the platform that you're trying to target is going to be really important as we talk through how do you implement it. So when we talk about where they source information, I, alluded to it that there are differences depending on the platform. So just pulling two of the more popular ones that we're hearing a lot about, ChatGPT is looking at large outlets. They're looking at the outlets that are reaching the most number of people. So things like Forbes, Business Insider, USA Today, they actually have a partnership where they have usage rights to look at any of the paywalled content to be able to pull it into ChatGPT answers. So if you're working with consumer brands, you might want to think a little bit more about your strategy to influence what ChatGPT is reading by looking at some of those large outlets with a really wide reach. Now, in contrast, Claude, which a lot of people think of as more of like a research tool, is looking to those trade outlets and niche publications. They might not be reaching the widest audience, but they're going really deep on a topic. So for our folks who are targeting B2B in their efforts, trade outlets might be a little bit bigger part of your strategy when you're thinking about earned media, because that's what Claude's looking for if you're trying to influence the citations for research. So it does make a difference which platform that you're looking for, but to know that earned media is a big piece of that. So how do we get started? That is one of the biggest questions. It feels really daunting when you're thinking about getting started with this. It is very much like the early days of SEO when we were all thinking about like, we know it's important, but how do we do it? For us, it really starts with the strategy. So as we're thinking about what our goal might be, really trying to ladder up to those overall organizational goals, because, like we mentioned on the last couple of slides, it depends on who you're trying to reach. So if you're a business audience, you might set a goal to have, X number of citations in Claude by the end of the year. Or if you're working on a major research paper, a white paper, or releasing new poll results, you might want to take a look at how you're doing that in order to set that benchmark. But really thinking through who is your target audience, who do you want to reach, and what are they using? But moreover, what do you want them to do? What do you want them to do with the information, and how is it influencing? Is it your reputation? Is it awareness? Is it subject matter expertise? Joey mentioned how people are turning to it for trusted information about purchasing decisions. How are you ranking against your competitors? And then as we get into the tactics, we're really going to focus in on earned media and your own channels, like your website and your blog, because we feel like those are the two that are probably easiest to influence. But what's important to know is, when we talk about who do you want to reach, we're almost thinking about AI as an audience of its own and thinking about who do we want to reach in that. So when we're thinking about where they source information, we're thinking about your website, your earned media, consumer-generated content, which I think could be a webinar on its own. Allie has taught me so much about Reddit already that I think we could have a whole strategy dedicated to how to influence what's surfacing on Facebook and Reddit. along with wire releases. So the two that we're really going to focus in on are your website and earned media, and give you some strategies and tactics that you can use walking out of this webinar today to be able to start influencing what's happening. So Joey, if you want to help us learn how to get started.
Yeah, no, thank you, Missy. Yeah, so now it's like Missy said, it's time to talk about how to actually optimize, the content that you guys are working on, but whether it's your website, blogs, earned media, when we look at what performs well in AI generated results, it really comes down to the type of content you're putting out. First, facts that you own. This could be original data, research, or insights from your day-to-day work, really anything your company is uniquely positioned to speak on. Second, information that only your team knows. Think about the questions your clients ask you all the time. The things you find yourself explaining over and over again. That's all kind of great content. And, because your clients are asking those questions, they're probably asking, AI those same questions too. So that's something to keep in mind. And then third is a point of view. This is where we see a lot of companies miss the mark. AI isn't just summarizing facts, it's also looking for, interpretation. So not just what's happening, but, what does this mean and what someone, kind of what someone should do next with it. And if your content could be written by anyone, AI has no real reason to use it. And then fourth, expert commentary. This is really where your expertise shows up. This could be how you're interpreting trends, what you're seeing in your market, or what you're advising clients to do. For example, this could be something like Missy kind of pointed out already, contributing to a trade publication in your space. Because like Missy pointed out, AI tends to reward more niche kind of industry specific content. So, those type of outlets can actually carry a lot of weight if you're able to secure some, media attention for them. And then, overall, you want your content to feel, useful, specific, and, differentiated. And then moving on to, the next slide. Now that you have kind of the right content in place, the next piece is how you structure it. And this is one of the biggest shifts we're seeing. Structure matters, almost just as much as what you're saying. AI tools are, constantly scanning your content, not reading it the way a person would or you and I would, but they're trying to pull meaning out quickly. So if your content is hard to follow, it's a lot less likely to get picked up. A few things we always recommend, clear headers, break things up and organize kind of your thinking, and then, bullet points. They kind of make content easier for, not only you to conceptualize, but also readers to digest, and also easier for AI to pull from. And then when it makes sense, linking out to credible sources to reinforce that kind of trust element. You're not just writing for a person anymore. You're writing for, a system or AI too. So you have to kind of keep that into consideration, is that AI is also an audience now that you need to be writing for. So, it needs to quickly understand what you're saying. And then two simple things that go a long way, a summary at the top. It's immediate. It's kind of so it makes it immediately clear what the content is about, and then FAQs at the bottom, because they kind of mirror how people are actually asking questions. And instead of kind of putting FAQs in one place, we usually recommend, spreading them across your site so they align with specific topics. These are small changes, but they can make a really big difference in whether your content actually gets surfaced by AI. And now kind of going beyond your website and moving into the, earned media element, the other big piece here is earned media. And, this is really important because AI tools rely heavily on third-party sources. Your website tells AI what you say, but, earned media tells AI what others are saying, and that carries more weight. So this really is about becoming a trusted source for industry commentary, and, that can look like news coverage, contributed articles, guest columns, even podcast appearances. And this is where it gets interesting because we're actually seeing this show up in the data. According to Muckrak's State and AI survey that they put out, about 89% of what AI is pulling is from earned media, and within that, roughly 27% is coming specifically from journalistic content. So, things like news coverage and especially trade publications that we mentioned can carry a ton of weight. So when your brand is showing up in those places, it gives AI more confidence in using and referencing your content. And one thing we always like to call out to is your news should include, product updates when applicable or when it makes sense, because people are also looking for that as well. So, what's new, what's changed, and how things compare. When your content reflects all of that, it becomes a lot more useful and a lot more likely to get picked up. So when you combine strong content on your website with consistent earned media, you're building a much stronger overall presence. And that's exactly what AI is looking for. So at that point, the next question is usually, how do you know if this is all working? So I'll pass it back to Allie to walk through how to measure that.
Thanks, Joey. I do want to call out that we have a couple of questions in the Q&A. Missy, I think these might be geared a little more towards what you were talking about. So the first is from Krista. Um, so she realizes that earned media is really important for AEO and GEO, but she has heard that some media outlets are taking measures to prevent LLMs from scraping their websites. Also, it's both can be true. So she wants to know if you can talk a little bit about what you've seen and what the research says right now.
Yeah, I think she's absolutely right. There are some publications that are limiting what LLMs are able to access. There's other ones that are forming partnerships. So I think kind of some of the bigger outlets or platforms like the Scripps News of the world that own a lot of different publications are probably a little bit further along where they've worked out with the LLMs how to monetize it, creating a formalized partnership. Probably there's some money changing hands. I don't know the details of it. But the smaller ones like the community news publications or the smaller niche trade publications that aren't part of a network, it may take them a little bit longer to make a decision, whether that's they're forming a partnership or that they're limiting LLMs. The advertising dollars flow where the eyeballs go. So I would think that news outlets are incentivized to contribute information to LLMs because while we might not see it, and I know Ali, you're going to talk about this part, we might not see the traffic go up, but we do see the citations come through. So my prediction is that a lot of the news publications are going to find ways to partner because the upside is there. I would say it's going to be a faster move to irrelevance if they limit LLMs from citing their publication. But good question, Krista. Keep the great questions coming.
And along the same vein, Andrew wants to know if LLMs source LinkedIn.
Not that I've seen just yet. If they are, it's not as strong as what we're seeing them cite on Facebook and Reddit. Those feel like the two, Reddit for sure is one of the ones that's rising to the top in terms of citations, closely followed by Facebook. So if you have an open profile, which I don't know too many people who do that anymore, but certain things that are shared publicly, it is scraping those. I've seen it more so from the personal page rather than the company page. I haven't seen that many citations for company pages from Facebook, but my hope is that LinkedIn will be one of the next up.
All right, and one more question, and then I'll go into reporting a little bit. But Krista also wants to know if Wikipedia shows up in LLMs.
Not as strongly just yet. I know the PRSA Independent Practitioners group was hosting a conversation about Wikipedia later this afternoon. That if you're part of PRSA, I think you can join that for free. I haven't seen it be cited as strongly. Like it comes up really well in SEO searches, just like LinkedIn does. But I haven't seen it as much on LLMs. Ali and Joey, what's been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I haven't seen anything where it's citing Wikipedia. Allie, I don't know about you, but I really haven't seen that at all.
Same here. I think when we first heard about AEO and GEO, I think that's where my mind first went was, oh, it's going to be Wikipedia, but it really hasn't been.
We'll see if that changes. I mean, this is all evolving, which is the fun and terrifying part of it is, what's true today may be completely outdated in 6 months. So kudos to you guys for getting a leg up and learning about it today because we know it's going to constantly evolve and change.
Yep. And Allie, before you move on, I saw Bernie had a question about FAQs at the bottom of a website and weblogs. Is it okay if I answer that real quick since it kind of covers what I just went over?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's a good question, Bernie. He asked for FAQs at the bottom of a website, weblogs. Would you advocate for using a synthetic audience? Using AI to generate those FAQs might be, or just have, subject experts come up with the FAQs or both. I would say start with, questions that you're consistently getting. Because if they're questions that you're consistently getting, then most likely they're probably asking them on AI as well. And then I think it's also okay to kind of use both methods of, using AI to generate those FAQs to see what it comes up with, and then maybe cross-referencing them with your subject matter experts to maybe refine them. Maybe they're not as applicable as, you'd like. So kind of taking like a multi-prong approach basically for FAQs.
I would say an interesting exercise is after you've written some web copy or just copy in general, having AI summarize it for you. It's really interesting that what comes out in terms of what they're pulling, and it's a good check on your end to make sure that you've hit your key message points. Because ideally, what you want to see happen is when they're summarizing your web page or your content, that your key message point is coming through loud and clear in that summary. And if it's not summarizing it in the way you want, you have that opportunity to recraft or tailor the message a little bit more. Maybe it's adding in a few more summaries or adding in some FAQs to help make sure that the LLM is reading your page the way you want it to.
Awesome. Thank you both.
Yeah.
All right, I will jump into the reporting section. So, how do you know it's working? Let's say you've implemented our suggestions and now you want to see some results. So, as we mentioned earlier, since people are using AI search and aren't clicking through to websites as often, since they're being presented with the information up front, search rankings and click-through rates are becoming a little less meaningful. So now we kind of have to develop some new reporting requirements. So first, you can start by asking LLMs questions to see if your company is appearing. This is great for exploration and getting familiar with each LLM, but it will deliver inconsistent results. So we don't recommend using this as your sole method of reporting. Google Analytics is also a really helpful tool to see how often people are clicking through to your website from an AI search source. But again, it's not showing you what conversations you're appearing in or how many times you're actually appearing in results. You could also call that impressions. Ideally, it's best to use a comprehensive tool. For example, Muckrak's Generative Pulse, HubSpot's GEO Grader, and then Yoast or SEMrush. They also offer a few tools. Most importantly, it's just you need to find a tool that works for you and then identify 2 to 3 areas where you want to see your brand mentioned. Don't start too broad or you might just get lost in the numbers. So as I mentioned, Google Analytics, it's not the place to track how many times you're appearing in AI-powered results, but it is a good tool to see how many times users are clicking through to your websites. And it can help you start, just establish a good baseline. So on our screen here, we've shown, so B2's website has appeared in some AI results. You can see in our first one, Perplexity referenced a blog, and then over here, Gemini referenced one of our most recent blogs. So if you use Google Analytics and you want to see if you're already being clicked through to by your audience, you can head over to Google Analytics, go to your reports tab on the left-hand side, and then if you scroll down under engagement, you'll see the pages and screens option. And then when that comes up, you'll see a chart at the bottom. And then the small little plus sign, you can add a second filter and you should add session source. So this is where you'll find the information like in the screenshots when people have clicked over to your website.
And you might be, sorry, Allie, to jump in. You might be surprised with the results. I know that, kind of like SEO, when each of us search the different platforms, we're going to get different results based on our history. So this really gives you a good baseline of what's being read already, and it might give you a starting point for differentiating yourself. Like if there's a certain point of view or trend, like Joey mentioned on your website, that's being heavily sourced, you can amplify that message because it is something that is setting you and your company apart. So thank you, Allie, for this overview of Google Analytics.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll jump into McRack's generative pulse because, as I mentioned, it's a bit more comprehensive for reporting your AI search visibility. So, like I said, you can see your company's overall visibility and you can actually see it sorted out by LLM. So, here it shows ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude. In addition, you can also compare your visibility score to your competitors. So, in the screenshot, it's showing different airline companies. So, if you're worried about comparing to your competitors, you can do that right there with their tool. Other unique features that Generative Pulse includes is a list of journalists most cited by AI, and then a list of outlets most cited by AI. And those become really valuable when you're looking to hone your media relations strategies. You can also see your brand mention sentiment by AI LLM. So you can tell how are you coming up? Are you being referenced positively, negatively, or maybe just neutrally being cited as a source? So as you can tell, there's plenty of reporting models available to you to suit your needs, but you just need to find the one that works best for you and stick with it to get consistent results. So I'll pass it off to Joey now so he can share more information on how long it takes to see results.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you, Ellie. Now, one of the biggest questions, and I'm sure what everyone's thinking is, when are we going to start seeing, results? The honest answer is, this is still evolving and it's not as predictable as, traditional SEO, but we are starting to see some patterns. Allie, if you want to go to the next slide. So in like the short term, think, 1 to 3 months, you can start to see impact from things like improving your website structure, making your content easier to interpret, and even participating in places, like Reddit or, similar review sites. Because those are areas where AI is already pulling information from. The longer term, that's where you are really starting to, hopefully build momentum. This isn't something, obviously you do once and you're done with it. It's something that you build over time, through what we've kind of talked about through media coverage, consistent content, and kind of ongoing updates. At the end of the day, this is really about making sure your brand shows up where decisions are starting to happen. And more, that's inside AI generated answers. So the brands that win here aren't just creating content, that's clear, credible, and easy for AI to understand and use. Um, so yeah, kind of with that, that's kind of what we have for our webinar presentation. And I can pass it off to you, Messi, but I know it looks like we have some questions, so we can start opening up for more.
Yeah, we wanted to leave ample time for questions because we know this is new and emerging, and what we're sharing today could lead to additional questions. So we'll get started in the Q&A, but feel free to drop your questions there. We'll also be checking the chat to see if there's questions there. But what do we have so far, Allie and Joey?
I can go ahead and answer Monica's question. So Monica answered or asked, are any of the measurement tools free? So I will say a lot of them do ask for a subscription, but there are also some free options. I know Ahrefs, that is Ahrefs. They do have a free tool, and you can upgrade and pay a little bit more to get more insights, but their basic reporting tool does offer some really great insights. And I know some of them you can also get free trials that are available as well.
And of course, Google Analytics is free, so you're able to see all of that. It does work off of historical data, so the sooner you implement that on your site, the better.
All right. I will just go from the top here. And then Missy, Joey, or myself will jump in. So, Chris, what is the biggest mistake you see companies making when they first try to optimize for AI search?
I can start if you'd like. I think trying to do it all at once. I would say this is something that's going to take time to get it right on your site. So trying to do all things all at once just gets to be really overwhelming, and we see people kind of like give up and walk away. So maybe taking small bites, and if you're already updating the company blog or the company website, making some of those small structural changes that Joey had mentioned, making sure you're using your H2s and your H3s for your headers as you're putting new content up. Maybe it's making sure all of your core pages have FAQs. I know that those take time to get things approved in addition to taking the time to go back and write new copy. So sometimes it's easier to work from the point in time forward and just say, okay, from today forward, this is how we're going to treat our content. That way you're starting to show proof of performance and know that you're getting the concepts down before taking a big overhaul. Joey, I saw you kind of nodding along. What were you seeing as a big mistake?
I definitely agree with that. And I think, going back to creating generic content, something that's not really showing your point of view or really, talking about something that you either specialize or something that kind of differentiates you from, maybe another company or someone else. I feel like oftentimes, seeing a lot of companies just doing very generic things, like that's not really gonna make, really like AI kind of cite you in something if, everyone's kind of doing the same kind of generic content. So it
Mhm.
needs to be, different and basically different enough.
Yeah. Allie, anything to add?
No, I think you both hit on it all. For our next question from Gail, looks like basically, would you change your advice if you were looking at a nonprofit versus a for-profit company?
I can start if anybody else wants to jump in on that. I wouldn't. I think the advice is the same no matter what type of organization you're working for. I think for nonprofits, your core audience changes a little bit, so just thinking through if you're competing, and I know it's a hard word for nonprofits, but you're competing for dollars, so what is setting you apart? Or if you are serving people, what types of questions are people asking that might need to lead them to your website? Because they're posing them in the form of questions and wanting to make sure that your nonprofit is surfacing in the answers as somebody who can solve that need. So just making sure that your structure, I would say outdated websites is something that we see quite a bit in the nonprofit space. So investing in your website, taking the time to sort of comb through it and figure out which pages make the most sense for people to land on, and making sure that they're structured the way that they should be. I think that is probably the biggest or the thing that I could see nonprofits working on first. How about Ellie or Joey? Anything that you would add to that?
No, no, I think you covered it.
Yeah, I agree. For our next question, do graphics or images play a role in helping LLMs find your content?
Yes, to a point. Describing what's in that graphic, particularly if it's like a graph illustrating new data or something that someone's going to need to interpret. So making sure that the text surrounding it is interpreting that graphic and showing how it is showing what telling what it's showing would be the right way to say that. So making sure that you're using your alt tags and describing what that image is showing is going to be more and more important as we go forward. We've been talking a long time about accessibility when it comes to graphics. I think, both the accessibility piece of it and also the LLM piece of it make it something that we can't skip anymore. Really taking the time to describe in alt tags, So if you're uploading that on your website, that you're filling out all of the forms on the back end describing what that image is, because that's what LLMs are reading to know if that picture is something they need to surface. I would say the same thing for PDFs. People have a tendency to just put a PDF up and assume that the text can be read by an LLM or even SEO crawlers, and that's not always the case. So taking the time to describe what that PDF is, along with describing some of the key findings like the executive summary on a page before someone gets to the point that they need to download something. That's not only helpful for your reader, the human who's reading it, but also the, kind of robot reader that the LLMs and SEO use.
Mm. I agree with you, Missy. I think they do play a role. I think specifically of Google's AI mode. A lot of times when I see it pop up, there's always a picture over to the right. But again, I think text does come first, and that's where it's primarily looking for information. All right. This is a good question. Does the physical structure of an FAQ contribute to AEO, GEO experience? For instance, an accordion structure that requires a click or hover that changes the appearance.
I haven't seen the specific data on it, but my personal feeling on it is even though it might make the page really long, I'm defaulting to having the FAQ front and center, because it is helpful for the reader. And when we're making them take an extra step of clicking that accordion or the drop down to see an answer, there's additional code on the back end, as you know. So sometimes that additional code might turn off an LLM. But for me, I kind of default to what's going to be best for the reader. If they've already looked at your summary and they've already read your overview, they may be interested in their FAQ. It really helps the folks who are skimming content or maybe looking for something specific on a page, that can be really helpful for the reader. So I would prioritize your reader and not use those accordion structures that I think have been popular for a long time. I think you're going to see a shift back to perhaps longer pages with FAQs that are displayed the whole time. Allie or Joey, have you guys seen any research on that?
I haven't seen research on it, and it's a really good question, but I feel like I see accordions being used for more like supplementary information, maybe not primary, high intent answered content to put inside that. But, I think it would be best to use in more of like a supplementary role, like something that you don't necessarily need, want or need AI to pull from, but something that's there for Missy's point, like for the reader to kind of like learn more or figure, kind of have next steps basically.
All right. Another question. Do you think meta tags for SEO are obsolete? For example, description, keywords, etc., since AI now favors semantic understanding?
Don't take my meta descriptions. I think they still matter. Um, I think they matter in terms of like the overviews, that's how I've kind of started treating meta descriptions. They still have kind of that keyword strategy in them along within the page title. But when we're thinking about headers, descriptions, summaries, kind of treating that meta description as like the shortest summary that you possibly could come up with, seeing that be surfaced in some of the results. So I think it still matters. Probably the longer list of keywords doesn't matter quite as much, really picking the one focus keyword matters the most and making sure that it is in that structure that, Joey was mentioning, making sure it's in some of your headers, that it's in the first sentence of your post or your content, making sure it's in the page title. I think some of those basic building blocks, like Ali showed us the image that had the building blocks. And I really believe that SEO is the foundation of it, and that we're looking at AEO and GEO as building onto that SEO structure.
All right, I'll do a couple more questions here. So, would you recommend upping investment in LLM platforms? Is a higher monthly expense worth it? I'm assuming this means like their communication strategy, looking into LLMs.
Yeah, I would say it's a worthwhile investment to look at some of the tools like Ali mentioned that work for you in terms of tracking it. Putting the tracking in first so that you're able to see where are you surfacing, how are you surfacing, what are you being known for, and then matching that up to your PR strategy. Are they already in alignment? If so, maybe your monthly spend isn't going to be as high as somebody who looks at those results and says, you know, the LLMs are not carrying forward anything on my PR strategy. They're citing us for things we don't necessarily want to be known for, or they're skipping over something really important. In that case, you might want to invest a little bit more in time and money in order to get your content house in order so that you're at least being known for some of the basics and competing. Because we are seeing that, 1 in 3 people are using it as the first place they turn to. That number is only going to grow over time.
Yeah, I think to go off that too, we saw a high amount of people also not only using it, but even if they're using, let's say Google, and they get that summary, that kind of the AI mode summary that pops up. They're basically just choosing one of those links to kind of click through to the next site. They're not even like, closing out of that to, kind of look further. So I think that's important to note too.
Mhm.
There have been a few questions about website schema. Do you have any recommendations or kind of best practices for schema to help your AEO and GEO strategy?
I would say what works for you, as first and foremost. I would say ones with a fewer amount of plugins probably are going to surface a little bit better. So the more customized you go, the more layered your, I guess, content blocks are, to put it in sort of like common language. So I would say the more complicated the schema, the harder it is, or the easier it is going to be for LLMs to sort of pass you over. Right now, they're really prioritizing quick results. So the faster your pages are loading, which with cleaner schemas, they're loading quicker. Um, Along with the easier it is for them to find the information. So I would say try not to go super custom with lots of plugins layered on top of each other. Really trying to pare it back into the functionality that you truly need would be kind of my recommendation.
All right. I think we have time. We'll do one more question here. How do transcripts on a website factor into your AEO GEO strategy? Do these help or not? And my guess is this is talking about maybe for videos if there's a transcript underneath.
Hmm. So one of the two of you want to start? I always have thoughts, but
Um,
Do you want to start?
yeah, I think this is kind of the same about like images and infographics. Is if there is text for the transcript, it's going to be a lot easier for the LLMs to pull that information. Um, I think trying to grab that information from a video would just take too long, so they're just going to pass over your website.
Yeah, I agree, and I think too, they are useful, especially if it's like as a podcast or something, or maybe if you're putting, let's say you put like a podcast on a blog or a video on a blog, maybe pulling out some like snippets that you want to like highlight, maybe not like a full transcript per se, but pieces that maybe you'd want like AI to kind of like cite or kind of be mentioned if someone was, either searching for that video or searching for that subject matter.
yeah, if you're using YouTube for transcription or putting anything on YouTube, they're able to flag key moments where you're able to have like jump links to certain areas of your video. I would say that's really helpful from a user perspective, but also helpful from an LLM perspective of you're sort of flagging for that LLM, where are where is someone sharing their opinion or a hot take on something. You're able to identify that quickly for an LLM, but also for a user, it becomes something that's really useful. I would say transcripts are definitely useful. Highly advocate for them. Any more questions?
I think we've got them all.
Any in the chat?
I think the chat was disabled.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for spending time with us this afternoon. We're going to close out the recording. You'll get a brief survey that'll pop up whenever you end the session. So we would love to hear your feedback on this webinar. It helps us shape what we do next. Be on the lookout tomorrow for an email from us with the recording. We'll be putting it over time, snippets on our website and also on YouTube. But for now, we're going to keep it private to the people who signed up for it. So be on the lookout tomorrow for that link. And if you have any trouble with it, don't hesitate to reach out. We're always accessible. If you'd like to chat about your specific AEO and GEO structure, we'd also love to do that too. So don't hesitate to reach out. Shoot us your questions even after this. We'd be happy to help. But thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate it.